Imagine this: a legacy, a name that echoes through Hollywood and martial arts dojos. Steven Seagal's daughter. You'd think the path to WWE glory would be paved in gold, right? Or at least free from the kind of brutal, career-ending silence that usually follows a spectacular failure. That's the story you heard, isn't it? That she crashed her WWE tryout, got blacklisted, and faded away. End of story. But that's not even close to the truth, because the silence that descended wasn't the sound of defeat. It was the chilling whisper of a surgeon's saw, preparing to carve through bone and cartilage. It was the echo of a single, catastrophic misstep on a cold December night in Orlando. A pop so loud, so final, it seemed to reverberate through the very steel girders of the WWE Performance Center. Suddenly, the hungry gossip forums, those digital vultures picking at every crumb of celebrity misfortune, they had their smoking gun. Except, as we're about to uncover, that gun was aimed at the entirely wrong target. What truly transpired after that bone-jarring snap, the raw, brutal truth of it all, is the only thing that matters. And trust me, it's a narrative far more intense, far more human, and infinitely wilder than any baseless rumor you've ever scrolled past on your feed. You'll want to see how this ends. Arissa LeBrock. Just hearing that name, it conjures images, doesn't it? A life of effortless glamour, of red carpets and private jets. This young woman, she never had the quiet privilege of simply being ordinary. Imagine, for a moment, standing over 6 feet tall, carrying her dad's unmistakable scowl, softened by her mom's supermodel cheekbones. Cameras didn't just find her, they sought her out, even in the deepest shadows. It was as if she was born directly into a spotlight so blindingly bright, she'd never once had to reach out and flip a switch herself. With Steven Seagal's action hero DNA flowing through her veins and Kelly LeBrock's undeniable grace, the world, especially the ravenous world of professional wrestling fandom, made its assumptions. They figured she'd simply waltz into a lucrative WWE deal, collect a hefty paycheck, and then, the moment the real work began, she'd ghost, disappearing back into her gilded cage. And here's the stark, unvarnished truth, the kind of spoiler that hits harder than any steel chair. It did get hard, brutally hard, in the first 5 minutes of her very first bump drill. But here's where the narrative you thought you knew begins to unravel. While she might have grown up amidst the shimmering chaos of film sets and the disciplined quiet of martial arts dojos, a world far removed from the gritty, smoke-filled bingo halls and makeshift armories where many wrestling legends forged their paths, Arissa fell unexpectedly, deeply in love with the grunt work, the sweat, the strain, the sheer physical demand of it all. At an age when most kids were chasing trends, she was sneaking into her dad's intense stunt rehearsals, observing, absorbing. By 16, she wasn't just observing. She was actively, almost compulsively, arm-barring kids twice her size in a dusty Torrance Jiu-Jitsu gym. Why? Not for the fleeting thrill of fame, which already paid the rent and then some. No, she was chasing something far more primal, far more real: contact. The undeniable, visceral feeling of mats pressing against her back instead of another cold, impersonal red carpet. She wasn't seeking applause. She was seeking the raw, honest feedback of a body pushed to its absolute limit. So, December 2019. Picture the scene. A cavernous Orlando warehouse, the kind of place where dreams are either forged or shattered. It's 6 a.m. The air is thick with anticipation, the metallic tang of sweat, and the unspoken pressure of 80 hopefuls, every single one of them running on fumes and zero coffee, all fixated on that one, elusive chance at glory. The first drill called out was deceptively simple: rope running. You sprint to the far rope, plant your foot, pivot sharply, and then sprint back. Repeat. But on that fateful 4th rep, as Arissa planted her foot, something went catastrophically wrong. Her anterior cruciate ligament, her ACL, didn't just tear. It folded, violently, grotesquely, like a cheap lawn chair collapsing under an impossible weight. The entire vast room, previously buzzing with nervous energy, went absolutely dead quiet. The only sound, a sickening, visceral pop, loud enough to rattle not just the surrounding silence, but the very inside of her own skull. This wasn't a botch, a rookie mistake, or a blown spot born of inexperience. This wasn't some manufactured attitude problem that the rumor mills would later invent. No, this was pure, unadulterated physics, a cruel, indifferent force collecting an unforgiving debt. Within what felt like mere minutes, WWE's highly efficient medical staff had materialized, their faces grim, and Arisa was being supported onto crutches, her dream already a fractured thing. Within days, she was under the surgeon's knife, the cold steel a stark reality. And what was the internet doing during this brutal, life-altering moment? The internet, in its blissfully ignorant, often malevolent wisdom, filled the sudden vacuum of information with the oldest, most cynical trick in the book. She stunk, the anonymous keyboard warriors declared with self-assured authority. That's why they cut her. The very same online forums that treat a wrestling journalist's star ratings as if they were sacred scripture suddenly dismissed a complex surgical procedure, a genuine medical crisis, as nothing more than an urban legend, a convenient excuse. Meanwhile, Arisa, far from the digital noise, woke up from the anesthesia with a freshly grafted tendon, a cold titanium screw now permanently lodged in her knee, and a rehabilitation manual so thick it rivaled a phone directory. The physical pain was immense, but the quiet, gnawing injustice of the online narrative? That was a different kind of wound entirely. Now, let's just take a quick sidebar here. A moment of raw, unvarnished truth. If you've ever experienced the brutal, unforgiving reality of blowing out a major joint, you already know something profound. The mental game, the sheer psychological warfare of it all, is often far, far worse than any physical pain. It's the battle fought in the quiet hours of the night, the doubt that creeps in with every hesitant step. So, for anyone out there who has had to learn to walk not once, but twice in their lifetime, for anyone who understands that kind of gut-wrenching struggle, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Right now. Because Arisa, she's still fighting that battle, still learning to walk, still rebuilding, piece by agonizing piece. And trust me, we're about to peel back the layers and show you precisely how she did it. So, let's dissect precisely why that insidious WWE buried her narrative, that whispered lie, caught fire and spread like wildfire across the wrestling landscape. It's simple, really. Understand the unwritten yet brutally enforced company policy at WWE. If you are not actively on television, if you are not part of the weekly spectacle, then, to all intents and purposes, you simply do not exist. There was no official press release announcing her injury, no sympathetic tweet from the corporate account, certainly no storyline crafted around her sudden absence. Silence in the wrestling world is not just golden. It's pure, volatile gasoline. And the dirt sheets, those online gossip columns masquerading as legitimate news, they were all too eager to strike the match. The phrase, quietly shown the door, became the prevailing wisdom, implying some clandestine dismissal, some deliberate blacklisting. But that implies there was even a door still open for her to be shown out of. In truth, the situation was far more nuanced, far less conspiratorial, though no less devastating for Arisa. WWE, adhering to their standard operating procedure for injured prospects, froze her tryout contract. They did, to their credit, cover the extensive medical bills, a significant financial burden that would have crippled many. And their parting words? A pragmatic, if somewhat cold, instruction. Call us when you can squat a small car. This, believe it or not, is standard practice, not some sinister act of sabotage. It's a harsh reality of the business, a temporary pause, not a permanent excommunication. Yet, in the echo chamber of online speculation, this nuanced reality was lost. Perception, as it so often does, calcified into an unshakable gospel. She failed. The company moved on, and Steven Seagal's daughter was just another celebrity kid who couldn't hack it. The Whisper campaign even included utterly baseless fabrications, like the preposterous notion of $1 million offer for her to intentionally lose a match, a rumor so devoid of reality it only served to further muddy the waters and undermine her legitimate struggles. This was not a burial. It was an injury, tragically misinterpreted and weaponized by a hungry, uninformed public. Then came 2020. A year that, for many, meant sourdough starters and Netflix binges. For Arissa LeBrock, it was a dark, isolating abyss. It was quarantine, yes, but it was also a relentless, brutal regimen of single-leg drills performed in the stark, echoing emptiness of an unheated garage. Every single repetition, every agonizing bend and straighten, felt like sandpaper grinding against raw flesh deep inside the wounded joint. The pain was a constant, unwelcome companion. She started a journal, a desperate attempt to externalize the internal torment, and in the very first week, the raw, unvarnished truth spilled onto the page. "I'm nobody's daughter on this floor," she scrawled, "just a busted knee." That's it, stripped bare of her famous name, her legacy, her identity, just a broken body. Depression, an unwelcome guest, didn't just knock. It showed up in steel-toe boots, kicking down the door to her fragile mental state. The external world, once so eager to embrace her celebrity lineage, now seemed to recoil. Modeling gigs, which had once been a steady source of income and a connection to her mother's world, dried up almost overnight. Because, let's be honest, nobody was shooting high-end lingerie campaigns over a glitchy Zoom call. Reality TV money, another avenue she'd explored, evaporated into thin air. Networks, navigating the pandemic's restrictions, demanded tightly controlled bubble shoots and, more critically, physical clearances she simply couldn't pass. Here she was, a woman on the cusp of 30, forced to move back home, her life stalled, shattered. She was learning to walk, painstakingly, agonizingly, for the second time in her life, while the rest of the world, seemingly unburdened, was learning to bake sourdough bread. The contrast was a cruel daily reminder of how profoundly her life had been derailed. Then, just as the darkness seemed absolute, a flicker, a lifeline. One night her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar caller ID, a name that in the wrestling world carried its own weight: Dustin Rhodes. There was no polite small talk, no hesitant pleasantries, just the gruff, direct voice of a man who understood the language of struggle. "Kid," he said, his voice a gravelly balm, "I heard you're still breathing. My academy's in Atlanta. If you can crawl, you can get in the ring." It wasn't an offer steeped in pity, nor was it loaded with empty promises of glory. It was something far more profound. A doorway, a chance, a brutal, honest assessment of her situation, and an invitation to fight her way back. 2 days later, Arissa, still limping, still carrying the weight of her fractured dream, pushed through that doorway. She arrived in Atlanta at Dustin's Academy, a place that smelled of sweat, liniment, and unspoken ambition. Dustin, the legendary Gold Dust, took one look at the cumbersome knee brace, the physical manifestation of her recent past, and delivered his first unforgettable lesson, a profound truth that transcended wrestling. First lesson: learn to fall without falling apart. It was a mantra for her entire existence. For the next 12 months she became a fixture there, trading the mundane, often humbling duty of laundry for invaluable, hard-earned ring time. Every single drill, every single session, began with the ritualistic, almost painful act of duct taping that compromised knee so tightly, so securely, that her foot would tingle from the restricted circulation. It was a constant reminder of what she'd overcome and what she still had to conquer. Rebuilding, however, was not just about physical recovery. It was about reprogramming her very instincts. Her deep-seated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt instincts, honed over years of rigorous training, taught her to seek submission, to end the fight decisively. But that didn't automatically translate to the intricate, theatrical rhythm of professional wrestling. She had to unlearn the primal urge to submit her opponent, and instead learn the nuanced, often counterintuitive art of how to sell a move, how to convey pain and vulnerability while maintaining the illusion of competition. It was a profound mental and physical shift. She spent weeks, grueling, agonizing weeks, simply bumping, learning to fall safely and convincingly, and running the ropes, a fundamental yet exhausting exercise, until her back was a roadmap of bruises, crisscrossed with purple and red, looking, as she often quipped, like a distressed Dalmatian. Dustin, a master of character and psychology, drilled her relentlessly, not just on physical technique, but on the subtle artistry of performance. "Camera's 10 feet away, kid," he'd bark. "Your eyes gotta speak to row 20. It was about micro-expressions, about conveying emotion, pain, and determination to the furthest reaches of an arena. She devoured hours upon hours of Dustin's legendary Goldust footage, not to steal a gimmick, but to dissect his masterful pacing, to understand how to make every single breath, every movement, every subtle twitch an integral part of the unfolding story in the ring. By month 6, the relentless grind began to pay dividends. Her knee, once a fragile, swollen mess, could now withstand 5 minutes of intense chain wrestling without ballooning up like a melon. By month 9, she was cutting 30-second promos, those brief, impactful monologues, with a raw authenticity and grit that would have made even the late, great Dusty Rhodes, Dustin's father, grin from beyond the grave. But the biggest revelation, the most profound discovery, wasn't about technique or performance. It was about identity. She realized she didn't need to lean on the intimidating Siegel scowl, nor the alluring LeBrock smolder. She didn't need the artifice of a tortured celeb kid gimmick. What she needed, what resonated, was brutal, unvarnished honesty. And so, she shed the expectations, the legacy, the preconceived notions. She became the blue-collar monster, the resilient warrior who would limp to the ring, rip off that knee brace with a defiant snarl, and then, against all odds, out-wrestle you for 15 straight grueling minutes. This was Arissa LeBrock, unburdened, unleashed. Then came the moment of truth. June 2022, St. Petersburg, Florida. An AEW Dark taping, the kind of show often overlooked yet brimming with raw, unfiltered talent. The venue was intimate, perhaps 400 dedicated fans packed into the stands, but their collective energy, their palpable anticipation, made it sound like 4,000. Her music hit. No extravagant pyro, no dramatic lights-out entrance designed to hide flaws or amplify a manufactured mystique. Just a raw, pulsing heartbeat bass line, a primal rhythm that instantly resonated. And then a roar, the kind of roar that isn't bought or manufactured but earned. The roar that erupts when an underdog, a true survivor, finally, defiantly, shows her teeth. Her opponent was a formidable one. A 30-match veteran, seasoned, agile, and seemingly twice as fast. The pre-match script, the carefully planned blueprint for the encounter, called for a competitive 4-minute match, a respectable showing for a returning talent. But Arissa, ever the strategist, ever the one to seize control of her own narrative, called an audible in the back. A quiet yet firm declaration to the producers. "Give me 10, she insisted, her voice resonating with conviction. "Let me work the knee story. Let me show them what it took to get here." And they did. For 10 grueling minutes, she didn't just wrestle. She told a visceral, heartbreaking, yet ultimately triumphant story. She sold the pain, expertly conveying the lingering vulnerability of her knee with every stumble, every grimace. She fought with a desperate, unyielding ferocity. She crumpled under impact, appearing defeated, only to rise again, each resurgence a testament to her indomitable will. And then, in a moment of sheer, unadulterated power, She deadlift suplexed a full-grown human being across the ring, a feat of strength made all the more astounding given she was only 3 months cleared for full contact. One perfectly timed hot tag later, the crowd, now fully invested, was on its feet, a unified chant echoing through the arena. "Let's go, Arisa!" It was the first time her name had trended, not for who her parents were, not for a fabricated scandal, but for something she, and she alone, had earned and controlled. A true, undeniable triumph. The match ended, the adrenaline still coursing, the crowd still buzzing, and then came the post-match interview. No pre-written script was handed to her, no carefully crafted corporate talking points to regurgitate. This was Arisa, raw and unfiltered. She looked directly, defiantly, into the cold, unblinking eye of the hard cam, that omnipresent lens broadcasting to the world, and delivered a message that cut through all the noise. Her voice steady, her gaze unwavering, she declared, "For all the keyboard warriors out there who so eagerly buried me, do yourselves a favor. Don't delete those threads, because I'm bookmarking every single one of them. For motivation." It wasn't just a statement, it was a mic drop heard around the world. That clip, that defiant declaration, went viral. It exploded across every single platform that had ever, in its haste and ignorance, misspelled her last name or dismissed her story. Overnight, the entire toxic rumor mill, the narrative that had haunted her, didn't just flip, it shattered. She was no longer the privileged celebrity kid who supposedly couldn't hack it, the one whose tryout was a disaster. No, she was transformed, in the eyes of a now-informed public, into the ultimate survivor. The resilient warrior who, through sheer grit and an unyielding spirit, had not just navigated, but had utterly hacked the false narrative to pieces, rebuilding her truth from the wreckage of lies. It was a reclaiming of her story, a powerful act of self-definition that no amount of internet gossip could ever undo. All right, if you've stuck with us through this entire gut-wrenching yet ultimately triumphant roller coaster of a story, if you felt the pops, the pain, the injustice, and the sheer, unadulterated thrill of the comeback, then you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. Right now. And don't just subscribe, drop a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts, your unfiltered opinions. Should Arisa take this hard-won, reborn momentum, this undeniable surge of power, and drive it straight back into a WWE ring, proving them wrong on their own turf? Or is AEW, the place that gave her a second chance, the place where she truly belongs, where her authentic story can continue to unfold without the shadow of old expectations? Debate it out. Share this video with anyone, absolutely anyone, who loves a true underdog comeback story, who believes in the power of resilience against overwhelming odds, and, critically, ring that notification bell. Because if the last 3 years, if this entire saga, has taught us anything, it's this undeniable truth. Arisa LeBrock, the woman who learned to walk twice, does not, under any circumstances, stay down for a 10 count. Her story is far from over. The wrestling business, in its heart of hearts, thrives on simplicity. It craves those easily digestible narratives, the clear-cut hero, the unambiguous villain, the soaring triumph, the devastating tragedy. But Arisa LeBrock's extraordinary arc? It refused defiantly to color inside those neatly drawn lines. WWE didn't bury her. That much is clear now. It was physics, a cruel twist of fate that tried to. Rumors, those venomous whispers, didn't define her. Instead, it was the grueling, solitary, and relentless process of recovery that forged her new identity. And when she finally, miraculously, stepped back through those hallowed ropes, the very ropes that had once seemed to snap under her, shattering her dreams, she wasn't merely Steven Seagal's daughter, nor was she just Kelly LeBrock's kid. No, she was something far more profound, far more powerful. She was the woman who had learned to walk, not once, but twice, through unimaginable pain and doubt, just to stand there and prove unequivocally that she could run. So, the next time you find yourself scrolling mindlessly through your feed, and a headline screams across your screen, blaring, "Celebrity offspring fails," or "Famous kid can't hack it," pause for a moment. Remember the silence. Because the silence behind that clickbait, the void where the real story should be, might just be someone, somewhere, grinding through the brutal reality of rehab at 3 a.m., their knee duct-taped so tight it tingles, their spirit unbroken, meticulously, defiantly, rewriting their own ending. Arissa LeBrock didn't just flip the script that was handed to her. She tore it into 1,000 pieces, wrote her own raw, honest, and utterly unforgettable narrative, and then, with every fiber of her being, she made the world sit up and read every single glorious page.